Good morning, everyone. It is Friday. This is the Friday Grief Chat. We have stuff to talk about. I have to go take care of something, so you're going to get Deb by yourselves for a few moments. Keep her in line, okay? Just be super careful. You never know what she's going to do. If she does anything naughty, put it in the chat. I'll be back.
Oh, thanks, Jill. Hi, everyone. Let me just get started with saying,
Stop ringing.
On a personal level, this is like the week of when my mom was dying about 23 years ago. And there is still, to this very day, 23 years later, where I still feel some of the feels that I felt each and every day. As I read other people's blogs or other grief chat rooms or grief Facebook pages, I just want to emphasize again how important it is that you honor these are your feels. And one of the things I found out about and I look at is, even though you're part of the same family, no two people have the same grief style. I don't know how you develop your grief style. I don't know how you personally, we develop them from outside influences, inside influences, things we want to do, things we never want to do. That's how you develop your grief style. However your grief style is, give yourself permission to just do your grief style. Okay? That's so important. We're going to be talking a little bit about grief styles and a wonderful book that Jill has mentioned before, and it's The Beauty of What Remains by, is that Rabbi Steve Leder?
Yes, it is.
Wonderful.
I'm a new fan. He's got several books out, but this one he wrote after the death of his dad. And he said, I've done hundreds of funerals. I've sat through hundreds and thousands of deaths. But your attitude changes when you've actually done it yourself for someone you love. And he's just got a lot of like the wisdom we carry and that other people who do grief carry that we don't quite realize, but he put it in some really great ways. So,
I want to bring that up and saying, because I was just saying how this and next week are two of the more spacier times of the year for me. Mm-hmm. This is when, even though it was 23 years ago, and I have to get used to every year the same thing, and that's not a bad thing, that I'm still grieving. One of the hardest things I had to do while my mother had 14 days from diagnosis to death is, this was my internal mechanism. Nurse, daughter, nurse, daughter, nurse, daughter, nurse, daughter. Right. And until you go through it, you don't know. And everybody takes that information in so differently, and they deal with it. And as I was saying while you were out of the room for a second, that even the same family members do not grieve the same.
And they don't approach the death occurring the same.
Exactly. And so my brother and I were just talking about this last night, because I was there every day, almost 24/7, except for a few nights at home. And he was away in Wisconsin, and he would come down 2 or 3 times a week and leave because he had to get back to his job. And I'm telling you, we had different grieving styles. And as you get older, if you have the opportunity to become closer with a family member, that doesn't always happen, especially after the family dies, the matriarch or the patriarch, whatever, or both parents die. My brother and I have had the opportunity to become closer. So he appreciates, he honors and respects what I go through, even though he did not go through the same thing. So take it away, Jill.
Okay, well, I like this book because Rabbi Later has, of course, as a rabbi, as anyone in a faith tradition, as Deb, who was a spiritual leader herself, does. Um, he's sat with lots of families at the death process. He sat with families during sitting Shiva, which is a Jewish tradition of the 7 days of mourning the loss. He talks a lot about some of the Jewish faith traditions around loss that lots of us could probably use and that some of us do adapt. And he talks about it like it is. When I am talking with a family, when someone is getting ready to die and they've had a difficult relationship, one of the things I typically say is, people die the way they live. And so if it has been difficult to be together, to be around each other, to be a family all this time, Hallmark is not going to come in and, drop the fairy dust and make everything okay. Elsa is not going to show up and make the ice castle pretty. It's going to still be the same way.
Right.
And he talks about how to help families say goodbye and to also prepare families for funerals. And he talks about the funeral process as being the place where you can really say the things for the person who died if they're willing to talk to you ahead of time. What things do you want your family to know? So for those of us who are healthy and okay, or not healthy and not okay, we can write those things down and leave them for our families and leave some directions. But some of what he talks about too is, for instance, some of the Jewish traditions, sitting Shiva. The goal of that is really to make sure that the family is supported. They're not supposed to leave the house if they're very, very observant. So for 7 days, other people come in and take care of them from the community, which we can't do right now. And he wrote this and then rewrote it during the pandemic. So he brought in the pandemic in a way lots of writers haven't been able to. And that gives you that opportunity to feel cared about and loved and not engaged in phones and cooking, and it just lets you be and absorb. And then he talks about the tradition that he still carries on with, which is when the rabbi shows up at the end of Shiva and leads the family in a walk around the block after Shiva is over, which is not something I know lots of Jewish families. I've never heard that, but apparently in their congregation, they do engage in that. And that's literally sort of reintroducing the community to this family without that family member present, which is something that my mom did when my grandfather died. My grandparents lived in a very small senior community. It was very cool. It was planted around community greens. It was low income because my grandfather was a retired minister and they make nothing, right? So very small community. And after someone's widowed, people tend to sort of do the avoidance thing because, I could be a widow soon, or I don't want to be reminded of when I became a widow. So after about a month, my mom said, we're not having this anymore. And we had a coming out party, not a rainbow coming out party, to be sure. But we had a coming out party and we put sandwiches and we put invitations around, the 5 or 6 closest community greens. And the other people in the community came by for a cup of lemonade and some cookies. And it was reintroducing Lily to the community without Elmer.
Yes.
And Lily started to blossom because Lily didn't have to worry about Elmer and his health anymore. And Lily could enjoy engaging. It's those kinds of things that it's practical. Of course, I'm boots on the ground. You are too. It talks about those processes. And it also gives a lot of weight to families that have conflict. His father and his brother, the father's brother, did not get along. And it split the family, even though they lived on the same piece of property. For 40 years, there was no communication as they lived on the same property and shared a business. And so it talked about, his sadness that his father didn't ever get to repair that relationship. His uncle died. His father had Alzheimer's. It never got discussed. And that wasn't something he could choose to continue to hold on to because it didn't do him and his family any good. Right? And lots of us think, a faith leader is going to say, no, you need to heal these things. You need to bring people back together. If someone is that difficult, if that relationship is that conflicted, then you say goodbye to that relationship and you finish that part of the relationship on your own, and then you leave it be because you have another world to enter, as if it were the end of sitting Shiva and you were taking that walk around the block. So I rarely get super excited about grief books because most of them are too theoretical, and they have a lot of this research, that research, and research is important. But I like boots on the ground.
I like practical advice.
His book is the one that says this is how you can prepare for grief in terms of the emotion and the spiritual, or not the spiritual. He doesn't insist on that either, which I really like. Archie's saying this is so true, and Tina says this is a lot of wisdom. And of course it is. He's been a rabbi for, I don't know, 1,000 years or something. But if you go to his church, he's the head rabbi at, where is that? The Wilshire Boulevard Temple in LA. And I did stalk their site today. And he's been writing messages every other week since the pandemic lockdown started for Shabbat. And, that's a lot about the congregation, but there's a lot of shared wisdom in there as well. So I just thought we should have this kind of thing to look at. There's a quote in here. I stayed up way too late doing this last night, but I don't care. I really don't. He says, this is his part about doing the eulogy. In other words, in my discussion with the family, I asked them if he could be there tomorrow with all of you, if he could stand up there and look out at you and say something, what do you think it will be? And there is almost always a still moment of silence followed by someone saying, I know exactly what he would say. And then everyone else chimes in. And then the eulogy writes itself because that person is present for the eulogy and writes their own eulogy. He's also got something in here that in his the last chapter, it's a kind of a breathing exercise. And I think we should probably, maybe depending on where we go today, close with it because I really, really like it.
I love that.
And I'm going to kind of adopt it because it's super cool. But he talks about the way other people have died. He talks about saying goodbye to people. And very practically, someone knew they were going to die. And he went over and he didn't look back when he left because he knew that was the end of that relationship. And the next time he'd see that person, they were going to be in a casket in front of him at the mortuary. So I like the practical. I like when people can talk openly. You do too. And it comes from, everybody loves this book. Aaron Sorkin loves this book. The Chopras like this book. Bishop, everybody likes this book with very good reason.
Wow. I love practical and not airy fairy, meaning in theory, and as many people as well as my clients know, I do not like to be positive. I like to be present. And last night in a humor talk, I talked about one of the funerals that I was the officiant. And I remember asking the family, as I often do, so did they ever make you laugh? Well, let's call her Aunt B. No was the correct answer. I mean, people were like, oh, and they're looking at each other. And I said, so tell me a little bit more about this person. Well, at the funeral, I had people raise their hand. How many here were ever amused by Aunt B? Did she make you laugh? Nobody raised their hand. How many had things going on in their head that they would have liked to say to Aunt B, but are inappropriate for this moment? And everybody's raising their hand. But it was a way of bringing everybody together. And it was probably 25 years ago, I personally learned about people don't, on their deathbeds, you don't necessarily mend anything. And my mother...
Like to.
Well,
But
ideally,
can't.
you can't. So in our family, my mother hadn't spoken to her brother in 20 years. I don't know what the whole deal was, but she hadn't spoken. She gets a knock on the door. Are you Shirley Meyer Epstein? Yes. Well, your brother has named you medical power of attorney and power of attorney. And went through, he had had a stroke. He laid in his own house for 10 days till the mailman figured it out. And
Wow.
and so now he has pneumonia and all these things. So I said, and I won't use the full word here, but I said, wow, when you went to see him, how did that go? And my mom chided me. She goes, you're just like your brother. His name was Seymour. We are never going to be friends. Never. And she said, once an a-hole, always one. And so, I'm not saying it can't happen. I have seen things with people who have had strokes. Their whole personality, all of a sudden, they're a pleasant person.
Right.
I have seen that. But that is, you can pray for a miracle, but it might not be the miracle you were
hoping for.
That
happens with dementia as well, too.
Yeah, exactly. And so I just want to say I learned my lesson. You don't get to repair. If you can't repair things in your life, it doesn't necessarily happen. I mean, you remember Orson Welles in Citizen Kane on his deathbed, right? The only thing he says is Rosebud, and it's some obscure word that was his sled, something he loved as a child. It just doesn't happen. And as a nurse, I have taken care of a lot of people, not quite on their deathbed, but definitely barely functioning. And they haven't been the pleasantest people to be around. Yeah.
I totally agree. And it's possible for the family to come to some healing. And, even the person who is the focus of the moment is not willing to do it. It's possible to take yourselves out of that moment, even meet in another room if you happen to be lucky enough to be together after the COVID pandemic. But you can also do it together online or by phone. You can do those things recognizing that you're going to be reorganizing your family for after this person is no longer with you.
Right.
And so it's time to start looking at how are we going to make this work in the future for ourselves. And are you going to make it work for all of you?
And also, do you want to participate in making it work? Which brings me, I'm just going to slide off to the side with another comment. Sometimes, you say goodbye to different relationships, whether it's a legal ex, whether it's girlfriends, male friends, whatever. And then you find out the person that you have separated from, their family member dies. I had one person, we're not friends anymore, but one person was very angry with me that I told the person she had split from, and that person sent a card. I always say to the person who's questioning, what does your heart say? If your heart says send a condolence card, even though you don't speak to that person, you have no interest at the moment of speaking with that other person that you split from. If your heart says to send a condolence card, do it. This
Absolutely. Is like, you don't have to be close to someone or even like someone. If you recognize that someone has had a loss, they've still had a loss, and you can still recognize it and do something kind for them.
Exactly. And even if they never get back to you, that's not the point.
The point is that you're reaching out.
You're reaching out because in your heart, you feel that it
Mhm.
is appropriate, not judging if you get one back from them, to reach out to that person to offer a condolence of some sort.
Absolutely. I actually keep a collection of um, not your typical sympathy cards at the house because I don't like the ones that say, "Oh, and they've gone on, and there's a beautiful, pine tree, and aren't you?" I don't do those. I do ones
Mm-hmm.
that say, "I'm here for you," or "I'm so sorry," or something. They're very simple. They're not flowery because
Right.
that's not me. Um, Unless it's a pet, in which case there's a picture of the Rainbow Bridge with everybody on it. Because when you lose a pet, it's a different kind of thing, as far as I'm
It
concerned.
is.
But I
Mm-hmm.
keep them, and if I just hear that someone I know has had a lot, I don't know them well, but they matter enough to them for them to announce that they've had that loss.
That's
The
right.
card will typically get dropped in the mail, and if it's somebody that I do know and care about, it's going to have a lot more words inside.
Exactly. And I'm one of those, I don't send a condolence right away. I have to sit, like this week, very unexpectedly, two people died. And one was a deaf colleague, would often put on deaf cafes in our community. And I was part of that. And her partner, I haven't sent something to yet because I'm just waiting for that moment, if that makes sense. I'm
Sometimes you got to
waiting.
find the right words and the right.
Exactly.
You got to have this, and then they'll know that you really meant it.
Exactly. And
But there are lots of ways for all of us to acknowledge losses,
that's
even
right.
in the pandemic, which I know some states are opening up. I hope if you're in those states, you're being super, super careful because I have my own feelings about opening up, um, which is not part of this program, but it's certainly part of me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I I hope that you are keeping yourself safe, but we can still acknowledge the losses. And I think one of the things we need to think about, there was an article in, I want to say the New York Times or the Post or something yesterday, and somebody's come up with yet another term. Um, Someone with lots of letters behind their name, and it's a fairly decent term, but it's basically talking about there's a grief deficit now, which is not how
Oh,
I
I
looked at it,
saw that.
right?
Right.
I
I
don't.
saw the term. I
I'm
didn't
not
read
sure
the
I like the
article.
deficit, but the idea was there's so much grief. Like, how much does each of us have to give at this point in time with everything everyone's been through? How much do we
Hmm.
all have left to give? And
Right.
how are we going to do that? And we've had all these funerals by Zoom and, with 10 people there, which is something that Rabbi later talks about. It doesn't feel like a funeral because you can't touch. We've talked about it too. And I think instead of looking at it as a deficit, which I don't like,
Hmm.
because I think we've all got a little something more we can dig down deep and find. I think we just need to all be ready for as the gates roll back, if we don't have yet another wave with yet another strain of yet another form of COVID with more spikes turning different colors or whatever it's doing these days, right? Because it just seems to always come out with something new. Um, let's find a way to make sure that we have some redos so that folks
Hmm.
can have those services or those gatherings or something, or even those
Hmm.
walks around the block.
I love I
I love that
love that.
concept.
I
Mhm.
love that concept. I'm hoping I will be reading that book before I do a couple other things, but I want to say something. There was something on my Facebook page about cultural appropriation. If there is a ceremony that you give credit to,
Right.
like, I don't care if you are, Episcopalian, if it feels right to buy a yahrzeit candle, which is they burn 24 hours.
Mhm.
Shiva candles actually burn 8 days and 8 nights. It's sort of like a Hanukkah thing. I don't know. But it burns 8 days and 8 nights. But a Shiva candle, um, a yahrzeit candle burns for 24 hours to take that time to honor that person or see the light and think of them. when I went to Japan and stayed with my friend, it was going to be the anniversary of his dad's death, the 1 year anniversary. And I thought, I'm bringing a yard-side candle in my luggage to give to him. And he set up like a little altar thing. So now, cultural appropriation, you took something from the Jews, you set up a little altar, which name your religion that did that, right? Jews, Catholics have altars, pagan and Wiccan all have altars. So there's all these different religions. Do what feels right to you and do it with a earnest and open heart, and give credit where credit is due. And you cannot do any better than that.
Exactly. And I learned something about the oil from this book too. He's got a lot of little bits, which you know me, I collect the little bits.
Yeah.
The reason that the oil was made from, and this is according to the traditions, he says, from olive oil is because when you shred and stomp and destroy an olive to get the oil out of it, you can see the light from it for so much longer. So you can, it's the image of you can take what's been a very tough time and do something beautiful with that. And that's where the light comes from, is the olive oil, and the olives have been stomped and shredded and abused and mashed, and then they create a light that lights your way. And I love
that's
that image.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, that is really gorgeous.
There's a lot of different things. I was talking to somebody else this week who's had a loss at the beginning of all this. And of course, everybody's been far away since then. I said, I think what we're going to need to do is plan a picnic or a barbecue when this is all over to reintroduce you to your friends and neighbors as you, not as a couple.
That's right.
To show them that you can keep your other half as an active memory and as part of your life, but you're out here functioning on your own, and you are your own person, right? With your own autonomy, and that you're okay. And it's okay to talk about people and to bring up their names. And it's going to be okay if you say them out loud while you're having a rib, right?
That's right. That's right. You can talk about it. I like the in-between stage of who are you without that person, and then reintroducing yourself.
There was a mortuary in Houston where I did a grief talk at the very beginning of the pandemic. I flew to Houston, and all the warnings at the airport were about Nigeria and somewhere in South America. I don't know. There were big warning signs about going there and coming back from, and 24 hours later, getting on the flight back from Houston, it was COVID and pictures of spikes and cover your cough, and we've put hand sanitizers everywhere. It was a completely different world in 24 hours. But while I was at this mortuary, it was a very fancy mortuary. Oh my goodness, they put crystal glasses out for the water for folks who were coming to the talk. It was not your typical jail mortuary.
No.
Right? And they had created something so that when people have simple cremations, they still feel like they can have a gathering. So they called it canapes and cremation. And they would have, suits and tails serving canapes and champagne. And then the honored guest was in their urn. And it had lots of rooms. It had like a library in it. It was an incredible building, truly, built just for these occasions. And they had a grand piano. I don't know if it was a Steinway. I was afraid to look. But, they had this whole thing where people could come and just hang out. It was, a 4-hour version of sitting Shiva, but with really good food and champagne, right?
Right.
But it was initiating the thought of, let's celebrate the life. And let's give the grieving family their support, but let them laugh too. Because those are the moments where you get to laugh about the things that they did that made you laugh and that made you you.
Exactly.
I love that idea. They unfortunately apparently trademarked that. So, but
Well,
I'm going to still say it out loud because I can do that.
you can do that. Um, Jill, if you don't mind, as we're coming to a close here, can we do that meditation or that?
We can. And forgive me, everyone. I had an accident this morning and slipped and did something terrible to my face. So that is why I'm sitting in this weird position and fumbling around one-handed. I apologize. But, stuff happens. Okay, so this is something he does with folks on the holiest day of the year to bring their loved ones back into to mind, the ones who've lost.
So that would be Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur. This would be appropriate for All Souls Day too, in other churches. Right. But it's also appropriate just if you need a meditation moment to think about someone you've lost. So all credit to Rabbi Later for this. I am borrowing it from him. It is his work, but he published it, so I'm borrowing it. So he said, close your eyes. Close your eyes and breathe in deeply. Breathe out and relax. Breathe in deeply again. Breathe in peace. Breathe in quiet. Now put yourself in your mind's eye in a comfortable room in your home or wherever you choose, and invite into that room a loved one who has died. Bring him to life again in your mind. Bring her to life again in your mind, in your memory. See her. See her skin, her hair. Feel his whiskers against your cheek. See his smile and his eyes. Be with her. Speak to her. Tell her what you wish for. Give her your blessing. Now allow her to leave the room. Be with him. Speak to him. Tell him what you wish for him. Give him your blessing. Now allow him to leave the room. Breathe deeply. And when you are ready, open your eyes.
Oh, that was beautiful.
Isn't that incredible?
That's just beautiful.
Credit to the rabbi for it. I'm going to use it again. I use versions of that with people sometimes when I want them to bring in the memory of their loved one, but I like the guided imagery piece of that. And I think it's something lots of us can use sometimes it's okay. I can remember them, and I can remember them for who they were and say the things I need to say, and I don't have to hold on how they died.
That's right.
It's not about their death. It's about who they were and my relationship to them. All of it. The funny.
Right.
Archie says he's going to try it. He's going to cry. That's okay. You're allowed. You remember the happy moments. You remember the happy them. You remember the silly them. You remember the irritating them. Right?
My mother used to say, "You're going to miss our arguments." I said, "No, I'm not." But I was riding in the car one time with my friend's parents because he didn't want to ride in that car. And they were arguing, and they're arguing in Russian. And all of a sudden they're arguing. And I go, "Oh, I do miss this banter. I'm glad it's not my parents." "You were right, Mom," I said in my head. And then I let it go. But yeah.
Word to the wise, Mom is always right. I was raised in a campfire girl troop in my tribe, and Monica Singer, who is always Mrs. Singer, even though she keeps telling us now to call her Monica. I'm like, you're still Mrs. Singer. We're still respectful and afraid. And she would say there are two rules. Mother is always right. Number 2, when mother is wrong, refer to rule number 1. Don't mess with that. It's in the rule book. Even after mom is dead, mom is right. Right?
Even when you have those contentious relationships, whether it was your mother, father, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, whatever, even when you have those contentious relationships, I invite people to find, even if they're, to just look back on one of those arguments with a little more light, or as I say, reframing and opening up your view. Just one. And sometimes that's all it takes for you to feel good. You're not aiming to repair the relationship, but you are aiming for you to feel better.
And to close it out.
And to close it out and to say, it's okay to say goodbye.
Because
you don't have to have
if you continue to try and rework it, you never say goodbye to it.
No.
It's always right there riding around with you.
It is.
It's not healthy.
No, and then people feel it in their hearts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like heavy, and you're like, what? So the sooner you can let it go with the butterflies and fly away,
mm-hmm.
the better for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Absolutely.
Well, Jill, this has been wonderful. You're gonna, I don't know, with one hand, if
I put it up already.
All right, thank you.
It's been up all along. So you can find us here again next week. You can find me at centralcounselingservices.com and jilljohnsonyoung.com. And you can find Debra on all the social media. We'll tell them yours.
Well, it's Debra Joy Hart on Facebook. You can private message me. I am on Instagram. I don't go there that much. And I think I might have set up a Twitter account a bazillion years ago. I don't even want to go there. People are, I'm just not able to.
You're not TikToking yet, huh?
No.
I have a TikTok now.
Oh my gosh.
Be afraid, everyone. Be very afraid. The grief TikToker.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I'm going to have to check that out.
There's only one video yet. Yeah, and you can also find me at therebelliouswidow.com because Jill never has enough social media. So we can always talk grief loss and how to make it good. We will see you guys back here next Friday, 10 o'clock Pacific, and all the way across the country.
Yes.
Bye, everybody.
Be well.